question is, what can hold China together? A vast empire ruled by a few 100,000 mandarins. You don't have a church, a religion, you don't have an armed nobility or military force. You don't have a big middle class, this is historically. So how can it be held together? I realize that in this session I'm talking about China, which you know better than I do, and quite a lot of what I'm saying you have already learnt at school. So this will be laying the foundations. But this account is meant to be useful for people from other cultures too. So what I am saying here would not be known at all by people in England or America. So this bit will be most useful and strange for them. But for you, it is what you learn in school. And then later, when we come to Japan and Europe, America, it will become more strange for you. If I make any mistakes, big mistakes, please let me know, okay?
我会帮我翻译一下。I have a question. Yeah. 就是你讲的这一个中国维系中国文明的这一个，你认为是语言和教育，对吧？但是就我自己的一个感觉，首先我认为这个语言应该是文字，而不是语言。就是因为我们中国，首先我们知道什么是中国。中国是一个包含您也讲了多种多样的一个地带，包括您去的一些其他的少数民族的一些地方，然后包括在广州、在东北、在北京，大家讲的话其实可能跟欧洲不同国家之间的语言的差异更大，但是大家其实用一种文字来维系这样的不同的语言，使大家有一个共同的可行的一套认知的方式，这是其一。其二。
Yes. Can you keep it short? Okay.
你把你的问题开始问题。
Also, it's best if the questions are when I ask for questions rather than when I'm about to speak again. Okay.
结束。
But what is it?
As you said that it is language and education that hold the Chinese culture together and civilization together. So, in his opinion, he says it is the Chinese characters. Instead of the language, because in the north part or in the south, that is different languages,
yeah.
but they use the same characters.
Exactly.
So which share the same language.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, he's right. Yeah.
然后还有第二点，第二个教育我也是觉得可以讨论的一个地方。因为文系，我刚刚讲，所以我们首先要知道什么是要解释吗？不用解释这个问题没法提啊。
解释吗
？OK， 什么是中国？我们知道中国是包括多种多样的不同的，包括我们知道这些我们研究少数民族、研究这些土司、研究边疆的这些地方，我们都是想知道为什么中国这么复杂、这么多样化的地方最后成了一个中国。OK， 儒家的教育当然在里面扮演了很重要的作用，但是它是不是使得其他的这异域在这一个中国的这样一个体系里面，这个是我觉得是可以值得疑问的一个地方。然后我自己有一个受到一个启发，是美国的一个人类学家叫做吴雅士，然后他研究中国普通人的神灵观念、祖先观念以及。我大致的意思是，可能一个官僚体系在里面扮演了一个这样的一个作用，包括不管是从个人到精英分子，然后在整个国家的这样一种叫做朝贡体制它都是一种官僚，用一种中国的这样一种官僚体制，然后使得底层的人和精英分子和国家的 这样一个统治者，然后再更扩大一点，扩大到我们这样一个朝贡体制之下，成为一个整个的我们中国的一个文明一个体系，一个儒家的一个。
就是你前面说的，就是说这个中国的多样性还有这个少数民族，然后你精炼一点，因为我这样。
吴老师没听懂。
对对。
简而言之就是。
其实我觉得这个等会儿，比如说那个中途休息的时候，你们俩然后跟这个老师一块儿。
对啊，后面讨论嘛，后面做讨论的时间。
对。
因为刚刚他说有问题就。
没有，后面做讨论时间可以讲。
那个同学的意思，他的意思是，其实儒家文化的影响并没有涉及到就是一般的边疆的这些少数民族，而是以一个朝贡体系来维持中央与地方的这种关系，而且
自己说得清楚。
对，他的意思是这样，是这样吗？
There's a big question. Maybe we just leave it to the discuss section. Yeah, after you give it. Yeah.
Well, what was it about?
Just very quickly.
你来解释一下。
我想想怎么说哈。
你说
If it's too complicated,
不是朝贡，是个官僚体制的一个。
we'll go on. And also, could you ask him that if he has questions, can he ask them when I say, could you ask questions? Not when I'm just about to speak. Okay. I left 10 minutes for questions and no one said anything. Right. So how was order maintained? The heart of it, of course, as you know, is Confucian ethics. And that is responsibility between people. This is something which it is very difficult for us in the West to understand, because it involves what we call a dyadic, a two-sided relationship between two people, which we don't have anything equivalent like that in the West. The essence of this is the relationship between a parent, father, mother, and a child. This is the fundamental building block of Chinese civilization. Traditionally, in Confucian thought, as you know, the father's power was very great. He could more or less do what he liked towards his children and his wife. He could sell them into slavery. He could kill them. He had nearly absolute power. And the child, in return, owed huge loyalty and obedience to the father. What happened was that this father-child relation, this is the symbol in anthropology for a father, a male, female. This relationship is then extended upwards to all the ancestors, down to your children, and outwards. It's extended to your teachers, to the relations between women and men, and obviously between the subject or the citizen and the emperor. In consequence, the family becomes the basic unit of the civilization. The child is part of an economic unit. You work together in the household. You share your labor with your other members of your family. And it is run by the oldest relative. The child becomes part of a ritual unit. You can only reach your ancestors through the older generation. You're part of a political unit. Your father will tell you how you should behave politically, and if you commit a crime or your views are not right, your father will punish you. And of course, you are part of a social unit of a family. So, in a sense, China traditionally was made up of many, many little families, each of these a total world, mother, father, children here, as total units. And then these single families were united into what anthropologists call clans. So you have a set of families belonging to the Yang or the Wang or the whatever clan. What Confucius did, which was extraordinary, it took some time for people to realize what revolution he'd made, was to link up this dyadic family-based link to the political system, to make the obedience and loyalty and rule within the family the basis for the whole of Chinese civilization. Because you turned the father became also equivalent to the emperor, the political order. So side by side you had the political order and the family order, and they were totally integrated into each other. You behaved towards your emperor in the way you behaved towards your father. So as a result of this, this is what made possible this revolution I mentioned before from feudalism, because you no longer needed to hold the society together through the normal methods which we have in the West, which is by giving land and property to the powerful nobles who then support the king. Here, you could use the strength of the family feeling on. And when you combine this with a very high respect for people who work on the land, the peasants, the ordinary people who work on the land in China have a high status, and also the Confucian educational system, allowing a way of selecting the best people to go up through the system, you can see how China was held together very powerfully. On the other hand, there were some contradictions and tensions in the system. One is something that I'm not sure whether any of you also still experience, but because the father was, or the older generation was so powerful, you couldn't really feel very close to them. You couldn't feel an emotional bond. So Chinese literature and history shows that many children didn't like their father. They hated their father because their father was far away, too stern and fierce. And I've met young Chinese who have felt awkward with their parents because of this great pressure of the parental strength. Another contradiction was in the position of women, because this is a famous, well-known anthropological observation. China has what is known as a patrilineal or agnatic system. That means that you trace your ancestors through the male line. So when a person has children, if she is a, shall we say, a Shu, belongs to the Shu lineage, this is Shu, she is also Shu.
Absolutely, we just like.
That's why I chose Shu. Or should we say, in honor of your President or Prime Minister, Xi.
Xi is better.
So, Xi. So, this lady here is a member of this. She marries someone from, it has to be another group, the Yang. Sure. She marries this person and she becomes part of that family. But she remains Shu. So one of the contradictions of the system is that women have a double loyalty. They have a loyalty to their new family, but also to their old family. And so in many Chinese families' tradition, you have a power struggle between the husband and the wife. The man trying to dominate and get all the resources that he could from his wife, and she trying to also retain her links to the family into which she was born and which she is still a member. Another big conflict which Confucius couldn't really resolve is the conflict between your loyalty to your father and to the emperor. If your father commits a crime, should you go to the emperor and say, my father has stolen this? Or should you remain first loyalty to your father? Or if the emperor says, you must kill your father, should you obey the emperor or let your relation with your father come first? You can't obey both. And this is another big structural tension in China. China resolved this by saying that the relation with your father comes first. If you have to choose between killing your father and killing the emperor, you kill the emperor. But this is not natural, or at least it's not universal, because when we come to Japan, they reverse it. The Japanese say, if you have to choose, you support the emperor against your father. And then there's the final contradiction. If all loyalty goes up through the system, and here is the emperor, and you must be absolutely obeying up this system. What happens if the emperor behaves very, very badly, if he is mad, if he is crazy, if he does stupid things? And how can you reconcile absolute loyalty with some reasonable room for disagreeing? And as you know, the Chinese resolved this by the concept and the idea of the mandate of heaven, Tian, whereby the emperor is there, but only if he obeys the mandate of heaven. So if the emperor does crazy things, and particularly if everything becomes disordered, if you have terrible famines and floods and wars and so on, then it looks as if the mandate of heaven has been withdrawn from the emperor. And then you have the right to say, I no longer obey the emperor, I will obey another person. So this is how it is resolved there. The next thing I want to look at is to do with law. China looked at from the West, historically, obviously now in the last 30 years it has changed. But until then, one of the outstanding features is that you hardly have a developed legal system. You have a vast, great country, but your laws are very, very simple, and to us seem rather arbitrary and perhaps cruel. I was looking at the Ming codes, which were published during the Ming dynasty. And they are extraordinary, not only because they are the same as the Tang codes, more or less. So you have the Tang code is the same as the Ming code, as the Qing code. So for 1,000 years, your legal system doesn't change very much. Secondly, they are extraordinary because everything is in relation to the family. All the different things you can do wrong, and this is a criminal system, are tied up with your family relations. So if you kill your father, it is entirely different from if you kill your mother or brother or a stranger or whatever. Everything is related to the family, so your legal system is closely interrelated with your family system in a way which is not the same as ours at all. Also, you don't really have a legal profession. That means trained lawyers. In the West, for 2,000 years, many, many people have gone to universities and become trained as solicitors, lawyers, barristers, judges, and so on. We have a huge legal profession, professionally trained just to sit in courts and to decide things. You don't have that at all. There's no sign of a, or maybe slight signs, but not much of a training, specific training for lawyers. And also the judicial process in China, in the Ming Qing codes, is very, very simple. You don't have, if you look at the Ming codes, they are about that size. If you look at the English legal codes of that period, they are like that, because there is a huge amount of detailed discussion about how you bring a person to court, what evidence can be used, who can say what the judge is allowed to do and should do, the whole process in criminal cases, as well as the vast amount of legal discussion about civil cases, that is, cases between people. That is more or less absent in China. Almost all conflicts are dealt with historically in China within the community, within the family. Even today, this has a big influence. We went to a model village 2 or 3 days ago, and we went just a small village of Fujian. And when we went there, there was a police, what they called a police room in the town hall. When we went in, I was expecting there to be a policeman there, and lots of symbols of police and so on. All there was a table like this, nothing else. So I said, what happens here? And they said, well, if there is a dispute in this village, someone comes, the police come, and they get all the people who are involved in the dispute, the family or whatever, to sit round the table and to decide how to deal with it. Just discuss what we call mediation, arbitration, conflict resolution. So almost all cases are dealt with within the family or the village by the village elders. This is the kind of system I've seen with Sarah in the villages we worked in Nepal, where they would never go to the police. It's the last thing you do, because the police will torture you and cause trouble. So if you have a dispute between people, you just have one of the older people in the village sits down and says, what's wrong? Listens to you both and then says, you're right, you're wrong, or you should pay this, and then it's settled. So almost all law in China conflicts were dealt with in this way. What is interesting is that, as well as not having a legal profession, solicitors, lawyers, all that huge array of people, and this is something that I don't know if you've ever thought about, but China really doesn't historically have any professions. What we mean by a profession is a group of people who are specifically trained and form a group to do this particular job. Now, we in the West, as you'll see later, have all sorts of professions. When I was a little boy at school, we were told that when we grew up, we could become lawyers. We could go into the church and become clergymen. We could go into the army. We could go into the navy. We could go into politics. We could go into business. We could go into agriculture. We could go into journalism and media. All these were professions for which, once we'd been through school, we would then be trained to do that. And each of them was a large group who had their own rules, their clubs, their professional ethics, their associations. And these have existed in the West for several thousand years, most of these. In China, historically, none of this. Apart from being a farmer, there are no other professions. You might be a small business person who is running a small business. You might be a teacher at a lower level. You didn't have universities of our kind, so you couldn't be a university teacher. You didn't have a standing army, so you couldn't be soldiers and high up officers. You didn't have a navy, so you couldn't be naval. You didn't have lawyers, as I mentioned. You didn't have a large clergy. You had some Buddhist priests, but otherwise not. So there were no professions. China was divided between small Mandarin elite and the rest. And this is a totally different social structure from the ones we will encounter when we come to Japan onwards, where you have separate organizations and groups. The next, we'll just do one more section, and then I'll give you a little break. This one is quite difficult, so pay attention. The cultural DNA, the basic essence of China, which we in the West have to understand, you live it, so you should understand it, is what anthropologists call structuralism. That is to say, the meaning of everything, nature, life, art, social relations, does not lie in individual things, but in the relation between things, which can be represented easily by symbols of yin and yang. They are separate but related. The idea of structuralism in anthropology came from linguistics, because a French linguist at the beginning of the 20th century called Saussure, it doesn't matter, he said that in linguistics, or in semiotics as it's sometimes called, the signifier, the thing that signifies or you look at has a relationship to the signified. Which he called the sign. Now you saw that in the matter of the tree. There is a word, an English word, tree, which has a relationship to the things that grow out there. So there is a relationship here, which is the sign. The word means nothing in itself. The object means nothing in itself. It is the relationship. So yin and yang. Yin means nothing by itself. It's like the famous Japanese Zen proverb, you cannot have one hand clapping. Yin means nothing. Yang means nothing. That means something. So it is, the meaning of yin and yang is there in the structural relationship between two things. Shooting back, shooting forward. So China is a structural civilization. I'll come back to this a number of times. It's very important that you grasp this basic. China is what anthropologists call a structural civilization. And not only is it that the meaning of your life as a Chinese lies in the relationship between you and other people, but these relationships form into sets, what anthropologists call relations of relations. So the emperor the relationship of the emperor to a subject of the is the same as a man to a woman, is the same as the sun to the moon, is the same as the day to the night, is the same as white to black, is the same as right to left, and so on. All these are a homology, a set. So this has enormous effects on everything: art, aesthetics, politics, family life. If a woman tries to get ahead of a man, she's not just trying to get ahead of the man, she is changing the whole world. She is threatening the emperor. She is trying to turn the moon into the sun, the night into the day, and so on. So it's a very, very strong embedded structural system which anthropologists have found in many parts of the world, but as you'll see, does not apply to my civilization at all. We never think of this. I don't think of Sarah as the moon, except when she's crazy. Or as night, or as left, or whatever. We don't think in a structural way at all. Anthropologists found this, the most famous French anthropologist, Lévi-Strauss, found this in the Brazilian jungles. And it's been found as the basis of Indian civilization. And another way of putting it, and this will be the last idea, and this I think was my most important discovery when I was writing about China and thinking about these lectures, is the following. kind of structural civilization based on relations rather than things is similar to the ideas of one of the famous founders of sociology, Emil Durkheim. Now, in his book called The Division of Labour in Society, Durkheim said there were two kinds of social structure. What he called mechanical and what he called organic. Very silly names because it's exactly the opposite of what you would think. Because mechanical is the simplest, and therefore you might think it's very organic and natural. But anyway, these are his words. Mechanical solidarity consists, and he found this in the very simplest societies in Australia, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia and elsewhere. In these societies, what holds a society together is what I've been talking about, a structural relation between people, like this. So each person is yin and yang related to the next person along like that. It's like a paper chain, like that. And the analogy or metaphor he used for this is that it is, or you could put it as segments, each of which, like that, or difficult to draw it, but basically in a line. And when they're in a line, they are like a worm in the soil. You all know a worm. A worm is made up of a number of segments. Each is the same. There is no differentiation. The bit of the worm at the front is the same as the bit of the worm at the back. It doesn't have legs, it doesn't have any other structure, but a whole lot of segments like that. So he said that mechanical solidarity, as he called it, structures, were like earthworms, whereas organic systems are based on what he called a division of labour, whereby, and the best analogy you can use here is an animal. So we'll take the human animal. So you have a human animal, and you have the head, the body, the arms, the legs. Each of these has a specific function or does something. So the head thinks, the body digests and works, the legs walk. In an organic solidarity, the structure is held together by different parts, but all of them interdependent. And as you will come to see, this organic structure is the one that we will find in Japan, we will find in Europe, but doesn't quite fit with England and America. But China is like this. It is basically, in its essence and structure, historically, not organic, but mechanical. And this has huge implications for the way in which China has survived and held together, which I'll come to after a break. So, have 5 or 10 minutes. Okay? Any questions now rather than later? Okay. We'll go on in 10 minutes. Okay?
And this gentleman, he was asking, he was talking about the neurons in China. But does your concept represent the mainstream society of China, or the minority?
Yes.
Because the minority is the structure of the society may not refer to bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's true.
So his question is, have you considered the nationality group?
I'm always considering them, but I'm dealing with the main central model of China. Because it would make it too complicated, because once you go into the minorities, they're all different from each other, and it would be a whole other set of lectures. But I'm fully aware of their importance.
因为其实他的一个你听懂了吗？他的意思就是说，你刚才问的，他有没有考虑到，就是少数民族这一边，他们的这个社会结构，可能他刚谈到中国这个官僚体制没有考虑到少数民族这一边，但是他说如果把这个整个都考虑进来的话，那可能太复杂了，它只能是有一个着重点，就是他要着重讨论中国的这个主流的这个社会是一个什么样的情况。因为少数民族他自己是自己的一个体系。他的问题还不是这样的。
最重要的问题是，所谓的中国是一个历史性的中国，还是一个过程性的中国？所谓我们对一个中国文明，可能是把东西都拎出来放在一个平面上看，这个是中国文明，还是从一个过程里看什么是中国文明？我觉得这个是我比较困难的。我们讲文明，可能是说，你现在用一个东西，是不是你一直都是这样的，或者你是从什么样变成什么样的，这样才能去理解什么是中国文明。如果说中国或者是在哪里，
你那个录的就行。
包括这个
你录那个
我认为应该是
教授
来这个过程中，它最后形成这样一个结构，而不是一个我们所说的功能主义的这样一个结构。
The father we call 中 or 孝. So when there's a conflict, when the emperor asks you to be your father, you mean that Chinese people will first choose to be obedient to the father instead of the emperor. 是孝大于忠. But I think I've read some stories in history that when it did happen, I think a father will, I think there's a story. A father wrote a letter to ask his son, when there's a conflict between 忠 and 孝, you need to choose 忠 at first, right?
就像以前有个故事，好像是一个
Loyalty to the king, to the emperor. So in the story,
忠孝两难全。
yes.
其实这个，就是他刚才说什么，在中国是选一就等于选二的问题，在日本只能选一。所以你问我大概也有相似的这个问题。
She had the same question. So according to I think I heard about some story.
The answer to that is that, of course, it's not an absolute rule. So there will be stories and exceptions. Also, the very fact that the father had to write to the son and say, being loyal to the emperor and not to me, is an indication of the pressure to be loyal to the father rather than the father. Also, obviously there would be a counter literature because the emperor would want people to be loyal to him rather than the father. So it's quite likely there will be a counter set of suggestion stories and so on. But, and I'm sure there are cases in this too. But all that I've read in the history of China suggests, and people looking from Japan, they all say the characteristic of China is that your first deity is to your father, whereas we in Japan, first deity is to your mother. So this is a general rule, but there are stories, narratives, exceptions, and so on, as you said.
In ancient times, 对于这个结构性的这个现在，因为后现代人是现在历史研究来说，这个就是这个是什么？是不是是多元的？是这样子的。举个例子来说，在西南的是。
China. I'm talking about mainly the Han area of China, not the minorities. I'm also talking about the period up to the end of the Qing and perhaps into the first half of the 20th century, but not about contemporary China. If I covered all minorities, it would become much more complicated. And if I covered the present, it would also become more. So I'm giving you a very simplified picture, which I will compare with a very simplified picture of Europe and America. But you yourselves know the present world and you know the differences between the minorities and the Han. So this simple structure, the earthworm, as I mentioned, this has an extraordinary effect and explains the two great features about Han China. One is that it can expand and expand and expand. If you have this structure, all you need to do if you, for example, during the Qing, when they expanded over huge areas of western borders, they just added on further segments. So you incorporate minorities or neighbors into this Han model, and it can be as long as you like. So this explains, in some ways, the expanding nature, and this is what is happening in the world now. China is expanding all over the world, and it can do so by just replicating this worm and making it longer and longer. The second feature is that it explains why China has lasted so long without its essential nature, for example, its language. How did it retain this extraordinary ancient logographic pictorial language? Even Chairman Mao, although he simplified it, he couldn't get rid of it. And its legal system, as I mentioned. And the reason is that if you have earthworms where each segment is equivalent, like this, the whole of China is in a structural relationship there. And if you cut it, for instance, if you are the Mongolian invaders, or the Manchu invaders, or the Westerners, or Chairman Mao, and you try and cut it, you cut a worm, it doesn't die, it just becomes two worms. So the Chairman Mao tried to get rid of all the four O's, Confucianism, family, this and that. He didn't succeed, as didn't the Mongols and the Manchus and others, because you were dealing with a very simple structure which, as soon as it's broken, just reforms. So it's very, very important for Westerners. You may know all this, but we don't. None of us know anything about China, and therefore it's very important for us to understand. For instance, for Americans, they may think that if they can make you all drink Coca-Cola and eat McDonald's hamburgers and things like this, you'll stop being Chinese and become like them. Or if they can force you to be democratic or whatever they want you to be, you will stop being Chinese. But that isn't the case. Nothing yet has destroyed China, and it's very unlikely anything will. So in the 19th century, when you suffered the Opium Wars from the attacks from my culture, and you had the Taiping and the Boxer Rebellion, when you had the Japanese invasions, which have been brilliantly filmed by Ran and her colleagues in this recent series on CCTV television. The Japanese thought they could just come in and take over China, but particularly in Chongqing and up this way, they found the resistance of the Chinese amazing. It just stopped them, and in the end repelled them. So China is really indestructible. And this, I think, is worth thinking about in the present situation, because looking at from the outside, you seem to be in a complete turmoil in China. Everything's changing all the time. Every time we come to China, it's changed hugely. And you are subjected to many, many pressures from the outside. So many people wonder whether the old China can continue, whether you are all going to become different, not Chinese. But what I've seemed to have found among my younger Chinese friends, for instance, when they come to England, they learn English manners and habits and so on. And they look as if they are becoming different. But when they go back to China, they become Chinese again. They don't lose their Chineseness, even though they absorb a great deal of the West. And also it explains another feature of China, which is very important for the West to understand, but I'm not sure I expect you understand. As you will see in the later lectures, our model is very aggressive and full of battle and war and conflict. And the way we have expanded our civilizations is to attack other civilizations and try to absorb them into ours through killing people or grabbing all their wealth. So it's a matter of conquest, destruction, and absorption. And that has been the Western tradition for over 2,000 years. The Chinese has been looked at from that point of view an extraordinarily peaceful empire. It's expanded, as you know, outwards from this area, from Henan and the Yellow River, gradually getting bigger and bigger. Of course, there were wars against minorities. There were famous wars in this area and in the Uyghur area and so on. So it's not been without violence. But compared to the kind of violence which you see in the West, it's just been quite limited. It's been mostly a peaceful matter of the Han moving, settling, marrying, trading, as is happening now, again, in front of our eyes in Xinjiang and Tibet. That is the model. Maybe there's a first conquest, but then there's a settlement like that. And also the relations with the neighboring countries is different. People often think of, Westerners often think of empires as being a matter of, say, like the Spanish or the Portuguese or the British Empire, where you have UK or Spain. We'll take the Spanish one. The Spanish go and they conquer South America, bits of South America here, and they become part of Spain. They have the same legal system, they have the same taxation system, they speak the same language, they have to become Catholic religion. They are part of Spain, or France, the same, Algeria, Morocco, Vietnam, all these are part of France. Once you are part of the French Empire, you have a French passport, you eat French food, you learn French literature, you speak French language, you become a Catholic, hopefully. So you are part, absolutely part, bound up. No separateness. You have become French. As a friend of mine used to tell me as a joke, in the French Empire, that is Vietnam, Morocco, all over the French Empire, every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the first lesson would begin, our ancestors, the Gauls were the people who founded France. So every little Vietnamese, every little Moroccan around the world had to pretend that their ancestors were the Gauls. Now clearly they weren't, but it was a pretended or imagined empire. Now the West think that that is how China is, so that as you become richer and more powerful, you are going to do what we did. You are going to kind of attack Britain, America, Pakistan, wherever you are, Africa, and take it over into your empire. So that is one of the reasons the West is frightened of China, because we think you are like us. You will attack us and try and take hold of our territories, give us your laws, your Confucianism, your everything. In fact, the model of the Chinese empire is more like the sun and the planets. So you have the Middle Kingdom here, the Middle Kingdom, and it has, like the planets floating round it, held by the gravity that is the pull towards China. It has Korea, for a time Japan, Vietnam, occasionally Burma, Tibet, Mongolia. They are called tribute states. That is, they are not Chinese. They're not part of the Middle Kingdom. But they are like younger brothers or subjects to a certain extent. They have to acknowledge that this is their center. They had to send their